Hey guys, tonight we wind things back literally. You're in a small wooden shop tucked along a cobbled street somewhere in 1700s Europe. Maybe it's Switzerland. Maybe it's England. The window shutters creak as you open them. The sky outside is still deciding what kind of day it wants to be, soft blue, with a hint of morning smoke drifting in from nearby chimneys. Inside, it's already alive. Not with people, with ticking, tiny ticks, dozens of them, some syncopated, some offbeat like a choir, where every singer is politely ignoring the conductor. The room hums, faint and rhythmic, like the shop itself is breathing through 1,000 miniature lungs. This is your life, and it's already late. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And hey, leave a comment with your city and what time it is right now. I'd love to know where you are and how close we are to midnight together. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You stretch, hear your joints pop. One knee gives a warning twitch. It always does when the weather's about to change. You cross the creaky floorboards, each footstep releasing a small puff of dust from between the planks, and you reach for the first shade, a curtain over the front glass. You draw it aside, and golden morning light slants in, catching the brass face of a wall clock and making it glow like a small, dignified sun. That's one of your favorites. It keeps terrible time, but it's honest about it. You move to the workbench, the heart of the shop, and it greets you with familiar clutter spools of wire, tiny screwdrivers made from repurposed bone, a box of replacement teeth for pinions, each one filed by hand, and of course, the scent. Always that scent. Whale oil, brass shavings, a bit of old cloth, dust, warm metal, a clockmaker's incense. You pick up your main loop, the one with the cracked leather strap, and begin inspecting a few C cone. The grooves are uneven again. You'll have to wind the chain more tightly this time. You sigh. That chain will be the death of your fingertips. Quirky fact: whale oil was the preferred lubricant for clocks in the 1700s. It didn't gum up in cold weather, and it resisted thickening, but it did, unfortunately, smell like decaying poetry. You don't notice anymore. You glance around the shop. 4 wall clocks, 6 table clocks, 1 musical piece from Augsburg. You've been pretending to understand for months. Pocket watches hang like pendants from a string across the beam. Tick, 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 tock, each with its own opinion of the hour. Historians still argue whether 18th century clocks were reliable outside of noble homes. Rural clockmakers like you worked miracles with uneven materials and inconsistent orders. But even the least accurate clock in your shop has its dignity. You sit, pick up the smallest screwdriver, and begin. This one's a repeater, lovely piece, silver casing, engraved initials you can't quite make out anymore. The spring is bent. The hands are stuck at 3:11, as if time gave up mid-thought. You pop the case open, careful not to lose the tension. The balance wheel is sluggish. You breathe on it just barely, and it shifts. Still alive. You talk to it softly. There you are. Lazy little thing. No one else would understand that sentence. You do. You feel something shift beside your foot. You look down. One of the shop cats, this one's name is Carbon because he always finds soot, has returned from wherever cats spend their nights. He yawns, complains briefly, and curls into a pile of discarded cloth. You nod at him. Late again. He doesn't respond, but his purring joins the ticking, just one more gear in the system. The sun climbs a little higher. You finish the watch, wind it, set it back on the velvet cloth, then move on to the next, and the next, because the clocks don't wait. They never do, even when they're broken, even when they're yours. You don't really sit down so much as fold into your chair. It's shaped to your body now. Wood, warped by decades of small shifts and long hours. Your spine knows where to rest. Your elbows know where the soft spots are. Even your shadow seems to fit the room's design. On the bench in front of you, today's battlefield. Brass, steel, gilded copper, scraps of thin parchment covered in equations and sketches you don't quite remember drawing. A cluster of discarded escapement wheels like fallen leaves from a mechanical tree. Your main file, a pair of tweezers, blackened at the tips, and the bone-handled blade you swear was sharper last week. This is not clutter. This is memory. You reach for a gear the size of a button, lift it to the light, squint through your loop. The teeth are uneven, not chipped, not bent, just slightly irregular. Enough to throw off the rhythm of a whole mechanism. Enough to make a clock hiccup every 30 seconds. So you begin to file and file and file. The sound it makes isn't quite a scrape, more of a hush, like snow shifting on stone or silk being folded. Every now and then, you blow gently across the surface. Brass dust floats like golden pollen, useless but beautiful. The oil lamp hisses beside you. You adjust its wick. It flares, then calms. Historians still argue whether 18th century clockmakers worked mostly by daylight or artificial light. You use both. You've used worse. Once, during a festival blackout, you repaired a Fusee spring by candlelight and a shard of mirror. Your eyes hated you for a week. You reach for a vial. Whale oil again. You drizzle the smallest drop onto a gear's axle, watching it bead, and then slide inward, disappearing like ink into old paper. That smell again. Sharp, slightly sweet, definitely dead. Quirky fact. Some clockmakers blended their own oils, whale fat mixed with lavender, rosemary, or even vinegar to mask the odor. Others believed certain scents improved precision. You tried lavender once. The cat refused to come inside for 3 days. You roll the gear between your fingers. Smooth now. Balanced. You smile. Just a little. just enough. You place it beside a row of similar parts, each one waiting its turn. Then you look up at the wall, not at the clocks, but at the list, a long parchment pinned above the window. Names, orders, promises you made and forgot to unmake. The top one's been there 6 months. Lady Charnwood, table clock, floral inlay, chime sticks at 12. You wince. You promised her you'd finish it by Easter. It's July. You pull out the wrapped bundle from the corner shelf. Open it carefully. There it is. All wood and bone, the floral inlay, chipped at the corner, the bell mechanism jammed from a spring you installed too tight after an especially emotional argument with the apprentice. You sigh. You begin again. The filing, the reshaping, the coaxing of parts that do not want to move. You talk to the clock while you work, not because you're lonely, because it listens better than most people. You glance out the window. The morning fog is gone now, replaced by a hot sun that makes the brass on your windowsill sweat. The street outside is still quiet. Somewhere, a cart rolls by its wooden wheels, catching on the cobblestones like a too tight ratchet. Inside, your world is quieter, except for the ticking. Always the ticking. Some fast, some slow, some insistent, some apologetic. Like a village full of people with strong opinions about everything except silence. You close your eyes for a second. Just one. Long enough to imagine you are not surrounded by gears, but by trees. That the tools at your bench are not files and oilers, but flutes or paintbrushes or feathers. But when you open your eyes again, it's still brass, still dust, still the gentle rhythm of time being kept in pieces. And you are exactly where you are supposed to be. The bell above the door doesn't ring so much as chime nervously. It's loose again. You keep meaning to fix it, but every time you go to remove it, something else starts ticking the wrong way. You look up. A man enters, mid-50s, wiry frame coat, too large for the season hat, tucked respectfully beneath one arm. He holds something wrapped in linen, carefully, as if it's fragile or sacred. You nod toward the workbench stool. Leave it there. He hesitates. It was hers. That explains the look. You take the bundle gently, unravel it, and reveal a mantel clock, oval-shaped oak casing, faint mother-of-pearl inlay around the dial, the minute hand stuck defiantly at 12. Its glass face is clean, too clean, like someone's been polishing it just to avoid letting it go. She always wound it right before supper, he adds. Said if the hour didn't chime, the food would burn. You smile a little. Did it every time she forgot. You open the back. Dust like powdered grief puffs out. Inside, the movement's fine mostly, but the spring's been wound too tight for too long. The chime arm is jammed under the hammer, a tiny fracture on the main wheel, like a hairline crack in a memory. You begin to unjam it, moving slowly, as if the clock itself might wince. The man watches, not you, the clock. Historians still argue whether clocks in the 1700s were considered tools or companions. In many households, they were both, markers of time but also personality. The family clock was often passed down not just for value, but because it knew everyone's schedule. You clear your throat. She kept it. Well, you say. She loved it, he replies. You don't say anything more. He stays seated, not impatient, just remembering. You grab your oiler, a drop at the arbor, a soft nudge to the balance. Tick, tick, it breathes again. You reach for your finest cloth polish, the bezel, adjust the hands to noon, and then gently advance them past the hour. The chime rings, not loud, not fancy, just 3 soft, hollow notes. The man nods once, blinks fast. Quirky fact: some 18th century clocks were custom tuned to mimic the tone of a loved one's voice. It didn't work well, but people swore they could feel who it belonged to. You reset the casing seal, the back wrap the clock again. It'll need winding every 5 days, you remind him. He nods. I remember. He stands, hesitates. Then, do you ever forget what time it is? You think. Say sometimes. But the clocks don't. He smiles. It's small, but it reaches his eyes. He leaves. The bell chimes again, twice this time. Outside, his footsteps recede into the midday quiet. You return to your bench. A bit of brass under your nail. A faint smear of oil on your thumb. Time in fragments. You scratch a quick note under the ledger. Repaired lady's chime clock. Burnt suppers. And for a second, your shop feels like it's breathing again. You are staring at a single brass gear. It's about the size of a coin, a shilling, maybe, but far more temperamental. 38 teeth, each one shaped like the edge of a daisy petal, and every single one has to be perfect. Not good, not acceptable. Perfect. Because if it isn't, your entire day disappears into the abyss of almost works. You hold it between your fingers. Turn it. Squint. It's not right. Not obviously wrong, but subtly, infuriatingly off. A single imperfection near the 23rd tooth. You run your thumbnail along the rim and feel a faint snag. One bad filing, maybe a breath too much pressure last night. You sigh. You reach for the microfile again. The bench groans slightly as you lean in. The clock you're building or rebuilding or resuscitating is a table piece for the apothecary, a clever man full of opinions about plants and terrible jokes about belladonna. His commission came with one instruction: let it sigh when it ticks. You weren't sure what that meant. You still aren't. But you're trying. Quirky fact: some eccentric patrons in the 18th century did request clocks that mimicked natural sounds, heartbeats, sighs, rain on tin. Most clockmakers obliged with custom escapements or manipulated chimes. A few just lied. You're not lying, but you are improvising. You glance at the gear again. That tooth is smoother now. You test it against the pinion. It meshes well enough to spin not so tight that it binds, close enough to pretend it was always correct. You place it into the wheel train and rotate the arbor. Tick, 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 tick. Not a sigh exactly. More like a hesitation, a breath between words. You decide that's good enough. Historians still argue whether tooth-by-tooth gear repair was typical or obsessive. In truth, most craftsmen didn't have time or light for that level of detail. But you do, because every tooth matters. One broken gear can shift a minute. One shift in minutes becomes a mistrusted clock. And a mistrusted clock might as well be a liar. You glance around the room. The long case clock in the corner leans slightly left. You frown. That wasn't like that yesterday. You approach it. Open the face. Peer inside. The weights are fine. The pendulum still sways in its gentle arc like the tail of a sleepy cat, but the anchor's loose. You remove it, inspect the verge, and mutter something impolite under your breath. The pin that holds the fork is bent. You pull open your drawer of spare bits and find another. Smaller, older, tarnished from decades of disuse. You install it anyway. The tick returns. Slightly sharper now, less melancholic. You think the clock might be annoyed with you. That's fair. The apprentice clatters down the stairs, late as usual. His hair is askew, one boot half-tied, but he carries a box of mainsprings like it's the crown jewels. Sorry, he mutters, breathless. The cat sat on the fusee cones. You blink. All of them. Well, most. You sigh. He grins. You hand him the cracked anchor. File this. Straight. Don't bend it. He salutes with exaggerated formality. Your wish is my time. You regret teaching him puns. Back at your bench, you examine the next component, a hand-engraved minute dial, faint floral pattern, tarnished edges. You polish it gently, watching the design re-emerge like a ghost remembered. The shop smells of oil and tea now, and faintly beneath it all, hope. You're nearly there. This clock might sigh yet. You look at the bench, the tools, the teeth, and then you whisper, almost. The door swings open again, but this time, it's not a customer. It's your neighbor Marta, holding a cloth bundle in one hand and a suspiciously lopsided smile in the other. She marches across the shop like she owns the place, which, to be fair, she nearly does. Her herb garden sprawls so widely, it's claimed half the cobbled alley. She slaps the bundle onto your bench. Your payment. You raise an eyebrow. For what? For the timepiece you fixed last week. The one that sounds like it's clearing its throat before every chime. Ah, the kitchen clock. You remember it. Loud, stubborn, and somehow filled with flour. You open the cloth. 2 loaves of dark bread. A small bottle of plum wine. And what might be cheese, though it's soft enough to be suspicious. No coin, you ask, dryly. She shrugs. Your bread's never stale with me around. Fair enough. Quirky fact. Clockmakers were rarely paid in full coinage, especially in rural areas. Time was expensive, and most villages traded goods. A clock tune might be worth a goose. An annual cleaning might earn you a seat near the fire come winter. You slice a bit of the cheese. It's edible, almost delicious. Marta watches as you nibble, arms crossed. Your apprentice's polishing technique is still dreadful, she says. You glance over at him. He's rubbing a pocket watch with the passion of a man trying to make fire. The result, more smudges than shine. You sigh. He's improving. Slightly. Marta snorts. If you say so. She leaves, trailed by the scent of crushed rosemary. You wrap the food, stow it on your shelf, and return to your tools. There's a new clock waiting. A tiny carriage clock no taller than a teacup, brass-plated, hand-etched with a starburst motif. The escapements frozen, probably from dust, or rust, or spite. It looks delicate, but it's heavier than it should be. You tap it gently. No response. You open the back. Inside, a mess of rusted screws and misaligned arbors. Someone's attempted a repair before. Sloppy. Maybe a blacksmith on a slow day. Historians still argue whether rural clockmakers were considered craftsmen or eccentrics. Some were both. You've known colleagues who spoke only to clocks and others who used beetle shells as bushings. You're more normal than that, probably. You clean the wheel, teeth, straighten the click spring, and reassemble the frame. The apprentice leans over your shoulder. Is that the one that used to belong to the mayor? You nod. He whistles. It's tiny. Tiny things lie more, you reply. You wind the spring. Wait. Tick, tick, tick. It lives again. Not loudly, not confidently, but alive. You close the case, polish the glass, and set it aside. It's not for delivery today, but it's no longer broken. You log the repair, starburst carriage clock, disobedient, but charming. Your fingers ache. The room is quieter now. Just you, your apprentice, and a few loyal clocks who haven't yet remembered how to complain. You stretch, think about the bread, then reach for the next job. Because time inconveniently doesn't pay itself. You didn't want to do this job, not because you dislike heights, but because this particular clock tower is tall, cold, and smells perpetually of damp stone and abandoned pigeons. But the parish bell's been ringing off beat again, and Father Remy has written 3 increasingly panicked letters insisting that time itself is misbehaving. You brought them all with you, folded and stuffed into your coat pocket as moral support. You cross the town square just after dawn, carrying your tools in a leather satchel so old it remembers your grandfather's cough. The cobblestones are slick with last night's fog, and your boots click in steady rhythm, a cadence the clocks would probably approve of. You reach the chapel. It glares down at you like a parent who knows you're late. The tower rises above the roofline, squat and stern, its copper weather vane already turning slowly, unsure which wind it should believe this morning. You sigh. You begin the climb. 77 steps. You count each one, 'cause the stairs are narrow, the railings loose, and the last apprentice to skip counting sprained his ankle and cried all the way down. You reach the trapdoor, push it open. cold rushes in like a reprimand. Your breath fogs instantly. You squint at the mechanism. It's large, 3 feet across iron, mostly with lead counterweights, and the same timber housing that's been patched with everything from copper shims to shoe leather. You know this clock well. She's dramatic. She groans when she's angry. She hums when she's pleased. Right now she's sulking. You kneel beside the escapement housing. The verge is off kilter. Again, a pigeon feather flutters from the gear housing. You sigh. Disgraceful, you mutter, flicking it away. Quirky fact tower clocks in the 18th century often shared space with pigeons, rats, and even resident caretakers who lived part-time in the tower rooms. The birds rarely paid rent, but often left gifts in the form of gear jams and misfires. You oil the pivot, adjust the pendulum rod, remove the chime hammer's lead pad, and reshape it slightly with your mallet. It's not elegant work, but it's necessary. Historians still argue whether rural tower clocks were accurate. Most weren't. They were close enough to organize the day, ring the Angelus, and scold tardy shopkeepers. But they drifted like clouds, and no one minded. Time, after all, was more suggestion than science. You tighten the central arbor and give the escapement a spin. Tick, tick, pause, tick, tick. That pause again. You crawl underneath the bell housing, grumbling the entire time, and inspect the weight gear. A tooth is chipped, not badly, but enough to hiccup every 2 minutes. You file it smooth, balancing on your elbows, and suddenly everything clicks. Tick, 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 tick. Perfect rhythm, like a sermon practiced for weeks. You lean back, let out a breath, and then you sit in the cold wooden alcove beside the great wheel, watching as the hour nears. 58, 59. The bell gear lifts. 60. Dong GG. A clean strike. One perfect note. It echoes across the rooftops, through chimneys, into kitchens and bakeries, the dark folds of still sleeping rooms. You smile. Even if no one notices, you do. You pull your notebook from your coat and write chapel clock repaired. Bell no longer preaches in jazz. On your way down, your knees creak louder than the stairs. Your satchels heavier than before somehow, probably all the smug satisfaction. Outside, the town has begun to stir. People glance toward the tower, not in reverence, not in praise, just out of habit, which, in a way, is the best compliment you can get. You don't hear him come in. The workshop is a forest of ticking today. 32 clocks in motion, each one slightly out of step with the next, their collective rhythm, forming something between a lullaby and an argument. But there he is, standing in the doorway, arms folded, posture rigid, in the exact way exhausted young people try to pretend they're alert. Your apprentice, 19 years old, stubborn as a jammed pinion, with hair like he's been sleeping on a gear wheel, which, knowing him, isn't impossible. You glance over. He's halfway through a yawn. Sleep well, you ask, without looking up from the movement you're adjusting. I was dreaming about verge escapements, he says. Were they working? They were flying. You grunt. He drops into his stool, already pulling out his polishing rag and a small box of mainsprings. You watch him work, one eye always on him, even while both your hands are occupied with something else. He's better than he was a year ago. Slightly. Still polishes like he's trying to remove sin from brass, though. You gently slide the verge movement toward him. Balance cock needs cleaning. Don't touch the pivots. He nods, too confident. You wait. Within 10 seconds, he's brushed against the pivot with the edge of the cloth. You sigh. He freezes. Sorry, he mutters. You're not, you reply, but you will be when you have to reassemble it under candlelight with a cat trying to eat your mainsprings. He mutters something about the cat being more helpful than you. You ignore it. Quirky fact. Clockmaking apprenticeships in the 18th century lasted anywhere from 5 to 10 years, depending on region and temperament. Some masters refused to speak to their apprentices for the first year. Others handed them clocks to disassemble with no instructions. You're somewhere in the middle. He hands the part back to you. It's cleaner now. Mostly. Better, you say. Less like you're angry at it. He perks up just a little. You look at the clock on the shelf above him, the one he built last autumn. The casing's crooked. The hands wobble slightly when moved manually, and it ticks 2 seconds slow. But it works. That's the thing, it works. You never told him how proud you were of that. Maybe you will, eventually. He speaks again. Master, you don't correct him. I've been thinking about what if we made a regulator. You raise an eyebrow. A regulator. He nods, eyes bright. Tall case, precision pendulum. Just to see if we could. You don't answer. For a long moment. Then you say, do you know how to make a deadbeat escapement? He shakes his head, then learn. You reach behind you and pull out a battered notebook from the shelf. Diagrams, smudges bits of pressed flowers between the pages for no reason you remember. You toss it onto his bench. He catches it, just, eyes wide. You wrote this. No, you say it wrote itself, while I failed. He opens to the middle. Sketches of escapement arms, weight calculations, an ink-stained note in the margin. Ask Muller if this gear train is real or wishful thinking. He starts reading, instantly absorbed. You return to your own work fingers, resuming their dance with brass and steel. Historians still argue whether masters were generous with their secrets or guarded them like treasure. Truth is, most just didn't have time to explain things that could only be learned by error. You glance up. He's already copying a diagram onto fresh paper. You don't say it aloud. But today, you're glad he showed up. Mid-afternoon settles like warm wax over the shop, and the ticking has faded into the kind of background noise you can only hear when you remember to listen. Outside, the world hums in its usual rhythm, wooden wheels, creaking down cobbled streets, the call of a fishmonger, too proud for his inventory, children shrieking in the square as they chase a wooden hoop that refuses to roll in a straight line. But in here, time holds its breath. You lean back in your chair, not out of idleness. There's always more to do, but to observe. The regulator clock on the back wall, your pride, your problem child, your whisperer of hours, ticks so evenly that it could shame a heartbeat. Every 5 seconds, its brass pendulum swings in a perfect arc. Not too fast, not too lazy, just right. And yet you frown, because it's wrong, not broken, but drifting 1 minute slow. You verified it thrice already. And for a clock like that, a minute is a failure. Historians still argue whether 18th century regulators were accurate enough for scientific use or more ornamental than operational. The truth, it depends on the hands that built it and the ones that kept it honest. You rise slowly, pull your magnifier from its hook, and walk to the regulator. Its face is unmarred, the glass polished. You run your fingers lightly over the carved cherrywood casing. It hums beneath your touch, not audibly. But there's a tension in good wood, in good timepieces that sings to your bones if you've been listening long enough. You open the glass. The minute hand resists you, not out of obstinance, but dignity. You set it forward by 60 seconds. Then you kneel beside the case, open the pendulum hatch, and stare. Everything looks right. You close your eyes. Listen. The tick is precise. Too precise. You reach under the bench and retrieve a candle, then set it behind the pendulum's path. The shadow on the wall wavers slightly to the left. There it is. The pendulum bob is not perfectly centered, just a hair's width off. Enough to change the arc by a fraction. Enough to create a delay. Enough to make your clock lose 1 minute every 6 hours. It hurts, but only because it matters. Quirky fact. Some master clockmakers used hair-thin slivers of ivory or whale baleen to adjust the center of mass on a pendulum bob. Others swore by pennies. One man in Edinburgh used a single drop of sealing wax and insisted it was the soul of the hour. You loosen the bob slightly, recenter the weight, tighten again. You don't breathe as you do it, because time, when adjusted, listens. You stand, watch the shadow again. This time, it glides evenly across the grain of the wall. You smile, barely, then glance to the ledger by the door. One name stands out, Clerk Henry, custom wall clock priority. You remember the man? Tall, stern, carried a notebook like a sword, wanted a clock for his accounting office, something that keeps time, not poetry, he said, so you'd promised him something different. Not ornate, not sentimental, just correct. You retrieve the unfinished frame from the shelf. Square case, polished walnut, weight-driven movement, but lean. You unlock the drawer of special parts. Inside a tiny cylinder escapement you made 6 months ago in a fit of ambition. It's smaller than a finger joint, more precise than most of your work, and never used until now. You hold it up to the light. It glints. Then you smile and begin again. Because some clocks are built to last, but a few are built to prove you can. The evening settles into your bones before the light fades from the window. You don't notice the sun dipping behind the rooftops. You only realize it's late when the ticking around you becomes louder, more insistent, as if each clock is growing more confident with the dark. The apprentice has gone home. The bread from Marta is half eaten. You're still here, hunched over the new escapement for Clerk's clock, and your hands, steady as ever, are starting to remember they have joints. You flex your fingers, crack a knuckle. The brass cylinder you've been shaping for the past hour rolls slightly on the velvet pad you use for finishing. You stop it with a fingertip, then hold it up to the oil lamp, squinting. Perfectly round. Almost. You file again. A whisper of metal falls to the table like golden snow. You haven't spoken in an hour. You haven't needed to. It's just you and the movement now. Quirky fact. Cylinder escapements, though delicate, were favored for pocket watches and slim profile clocks because of their compact form. But they were notoriously temperamental, sensitive to heat and cold. One sneeze could ruin the balance. One misplaced hair of oil, catastrophic. You smear a cloth over your bench, wipe up the filings, clear space, begin to assemble. The ticking continues. Above you, the long case clock announces the hour with a low rolling chime. 9. The sound fades into the corners of the shop like smoke curling under the floorboards. You lean back and glance at your wall of finished pieces. All manner of clocks, ornate rococo styles with gilded flowers and fluted columns, austere black ebonized frames with Roman numerals sharp enough to cut, one carved entirely from bone. Each one ticks a little differently. Each one has a story. That one there, gift for a bride whose fiancé went to sea and never came back. She still picks it up every New Year for cleaning. That oval one, paid for with a set of silver spoons and a promise to stop drinking. The man never did, but the clock kept time anyway. The square regulator, the one with the slight hesitation every 47 seconds. That one's yours. Built it at 19, rebuilt it at 21. Haven't touched it since. Historians still argue whether clockmakers were artists or engineers. You think they were both forced to straddle beauty and accuracy, with a foot in each grave, always falling toward the side that paid rent. You reach again for Clerk's movement. Slide the cylinder escapement into place. Snap. A clean fit. You wind it just slightly. And there, tick, tick, tick. Not loud, not haughty, but faithful. You exhale through your nose. Then you notice it. That familiar scent. Not oil, not brass, not bread. Ink. Fresh. You look toward the door. Someone's slipped a note under it. You retrieve it, half expecting another repair request or a neighbor's complaint about the ticking at midnight. Instead, it reads, "I hear your clocks from my window. I used to hate them. Now I wait for them. No signature, no name." You fold it once, place it beside your ledger. Then you return to the bench, and you keep building, because Somewhere out there, someone's listening, even if they don't know what for. You're halfway through fitting the minute arbor on Clerk's clock when the chapel bell tolls again. 10 slow chimes, measured, hollow, familiar. You pause, not because of the sound, but because of what comes next. Right on schedule, your second most difficult client walks in. Monsieur Biraud. You hear him before you see him, cane tapping twice before each step breath, like someone forever unimpressed. He enters the workshop as if it's done something to personally offend him. In his arms, cradled like a child, is a musical clock. Again, the same one he's brought in 4 times this year. Still sings the wrong hymn. He announces voice, nasal, and noble. You resist the urge to point out that he tuned the original cylinder by hand and likely switched the pins for Ave Maria and Laudate Dominum himself. Instead, you gesture to the stool. Leave it there. He complies, barely concealing a grimace. You unwrap the clock. It's lovely, if stubborn. Oak case, beveled glass, brass inlay. The music box cylinder is slightly tarnished, the pins dulled. You rotate it slowly. You realize, you say, most people would simply enjoy the tune, even if it wasn't ecclesiastically correct. He huffs. I didn't order sentimentality. I ordered precision. Historians still argue whether musical clocks were novelties or genuine religious instruments. In truth, they were both. The faithful like to hear hymns at noon. The wealthy like to show off that they could make time sing. You pick up the barrel. It's off by exactly 5 degrees, enough to shift the comb timing. Have you been winding this with force again? He bristles. I used both hands, gently, gently, like a baker kneading dough, or gently like a priest turning pages. He doesn't answer. You chuckle under your breath. Quirky fact, 18th century musical clocks often relied on pinned barrels. Much like music boxes, changing the tune required rotating or replacing the cylinder, a task best done sober, something not all owners considered. You disassemble the mechanism clean. The pins realign the barrel. You replace 2 springs with spares you've kept since 1778. While you work, Biraud examines the shelves of finished clocks. He taps one casing with his cane. You flinch. That one still ticks too brightly. Time doesn't know how to whisper, you reply. He almost smiles. You finish tuning, wind the mechanism, press the tiny lever. And there it is. A breathless moment, then the comb plucks. A soft, hesitant chime. Laudate Dominum, in a key almost too fragile to name. You both listen. It's not perfect, but it's close enough to believe. He says nothing, just takes the clock, nods once, and leaves. You sigh. Write in the ledger, M. Biraud's hymn clock. He still knows the words. The apprentice returns, rubbing sleep from his eyes. I thought you left, you mutter. I forgot my other boot, he replies, then pauses. Was that Biraud? You nod. What did he bring? Faith, you say. He blinks. Faith in G major. The apprentice stares, then shrugs, then grins. The hour creeps toward 11. The oil lamp flickers in its cradle. The bench creaks as you sit again. Your tools are tired, but your hands still remember the weight of time. So you wind another spring, and you begin again. There's something about the hour before midnight. It doesn't rush, it stretches. The clocks in your shop tick more slowly now. Not actually, of course, but it feels like they do, as if they've noticed the day slipping away and decided to savor what's left. You're still at your bench, still filing, shaping, checking. The custom wall clock for Mr. Clerk is nearly done. The movement is tight, precise. The dial is hand-painted Roman numerals with a sober serif, and the hands are slender, steel-blued, sharp enough to point blame. You glance toward the regulator on the back wall. Still true, still smug. You smile at it the way an older sibling might, and then you hear it. A sound that does not belong in a clock shop. Scraping. From above. You freeze the attic, where you keep your old projects. The failed ones. The nearly made. The almost worked. And the one you swore never to touch again. You rise slowly. Take the oil lamp and mount the stairs. They creak in protest. These old beams don't like surprises. Neither do you. The attic door is slightly ajar. You push it open. Inside, shadows and clocks. So many clocks. None running, none welcome. And there in the far corner, exactly where you left it, sits the automaton. Historians still argue whether 18th century automata were acts of genius or madness. Yours was both. Quirky fact: a few clockmakers attempted humanoid machines, mechanical singers, chess players, angels, who bowed on the hour. Most were impressive. A few were cursed, or at least accused of being so. You step toward it. It's covered now. A cloth draped over its frame. You haven't looked at it in 3 years. Not since the night it moved on its own. Yes, you know it didn't. Not really. But memory is generous with its lies. You pull back the cloth. There she is. Your finest mistake. A woman of brass and birch eyes of painted enamel lips parted in silent song. Her hands are carved to hold a quill. Her chest cavity holds the smallest movement you ever built. 26 gears. 1 melody, 0. Forgiveness. She never quite worked. She almost did. Once her head tilted. That was the night you covered her up. You sigh now. Touch her wrist. Still cold. Still lifeless. You whisper, "You're still beautiful, you know." And then you leave. You lock the attic behind you. Back at your bench, you write a single line in your notebook. Some clocks don't need to be fixed. The shop is quiet again. The apprentice has fallen asleep on the stair. The oil lamp burns low. You wind the new clock gently. It ticks, softly, without pride, just truth. And somewhere above you, in a room full of ghosts, the broken machines stay still. For now, You wake before dawn, but not because of a rooster or a bell, or even the usual creak of the neighbor's cat trying to sneak into your shop to sleep behind the pendulums. You wake because you dreamed of your father's hands, not his face, not his voice, just his hands, ink-stained, always cold, always patient. In the dream, he was holding a mainspring, coaxing it gently into a barrel, humming the same off-key waltz he hummed whenever the work was delicate. You lie there a moment, letting the memory settle, until you realize you've already sat up, feet touching the cold wooden floor, your body moving before permission was granted. It's early. The town hasn't stirred. The clocks haven't caught their breath. Only yours tick in here, in this small sanctum of timekeepers and time losers. You light the oil lamp, stretch your back, pull on your coat, and go to the ledger. You write down 2 names, your father's and your own. Just initials. Just for a moment. Then you turn the page to the day's orders. 4 repairs, 1 delivery, 1 visit to the miller's widow, whose kitchen clock has begun chiming every half hour like it's panicking. First, though, you reach for something older, your father's last clock. You keep it on a high shelf where dust collects slowly and reverently. It never worked. Not entirely. The escapement is too clever by half the wheel train, too compact, the gear ratios so delicate that even breathing too close throws them off. He was building it when he passed. You've never finished it, not because you can't, because you weren't sure you should. Historians still argue whether finishing another maker's work is a tribute or a theft. Some believe a master's final piece should be preserved in its flawed purity. Others say every clock longs to tick, no matter who starts or ends the job. You place it on the bench, carefully, like it remembers. It's lighter than you expect. You unscrew the back plate. The movement is nested like a secret. You recognize his flourishes, curved pivots, hand-filed, escapement, teeth, his signature habit of marking spring tension with notches instead of ink. You study it, not as a son, but as a clockmaker. And then, slowly, you begin. Quirky fact: a few master-apprentice duos in the 18th century signed clocks together, often with overlapping initials engraved beneath the dial. One pair famously switched their letters each time, just to confuse future collectors. The first repair is to the anchor pin. It's cracked, likely weakened by years of idling. You replace it with one of your own. The second issue is more delicate. The balance spring is mismatched, probably salvaged during a material shortage. You measure it, replace it with one from your private drawer, the kind you swore you'd save for something special. You wind it gently. The gear train spins once, stops. You adjust the verge. File one tooth. Try again. Tick, tick, pause. Then, tick, tick, tick. You freeze. The sound is soft, hesitant, and then stronger. It runs, not fast, not perfect, but it runs. You sit back, say nothing, because some things don't require applause. You log it in your book. PAL's final clock began to breathe. Then you place it back on the shelf. Not to be sold, not to be touched, just to be heard. And outside in the world that hasn't yet woken, the first bird begins to sing. You make the delivery just after sunrise. The street still glistens with dew, the stones slick underfoot, the air thick with chimney smoke that hasn't yet chosen a direction. Mr. Clerk's clock is cradled under your arm, wrapped in oilcloth, ticking faintly, like a patient heartbeat, trying not to interrupt the morning. You pass the bakery already open. You smell burnt crust and cardamom. The baker waves. You nod. He points to a clock in his window that's been stuck at 4:12 for 3 weeks. You pretend not to see it. There's something important about silence today. Clerk's office is on the second floor, above a tailor's shop. Stairs too steep, wood too thin, door too loud. You knock anyway. He answers like he's been waiting all night. "I thought you forgot," he says. "I considered it." He doesn't smile, but the corner of his eye softens. You set the clock on his desk. Unwrap it slowly, reverently. He leans in. Walnut case, clean face, long brass pendulum behind glass. You open the back. Let him see the movement. It'll lose 2 seconds a month, you say, or gain 3. Depends if it's jealous of your pocket watch. He huffs. That's as close to a laugh as he gets. He reaches for his coin pouch. You stop him. No. He frowns. You paid in advance, you say. And besides, I made this one to win a bet with myself. Did you win? You shrug. Time will tell. Historians still argue whether craftsmen in this era built for money or pride. The answer usually was both, but pride lasted longer. He nods, runs a hand along the top of the case, and says nothing else. You leave before he asks anything sentimental. Back in the street, the town has fully awoken. Shutters open, laundry flaps, the square smells like wet stone and hope. You head home. The apprentice is already waiting. He's got a pile of disassembled watch parts in front of him, face smudged, expression serious. You glance at the pile. He looks up. I think I made it worse. You raise an eyebrow. What did you start with? A watch. I think. You sigh. Sit beside him. Examine the pieces. Balance, cock, bent. Escapement, jammed with lint. The jewel, gone. Quirky fact. In 18th century watchmaking, young apprentices were often assigned broken timepieces to learn the language of failure. One master insisted that no one could build a new watch until they'd failed to fix 20. You show him how to reseat the balance wheel. He watches closely. You say, "This part. It's not the heart, it's the lungs. Keeps things breathing." He nods, not blinking. And for the first time, he doesn't rush. You let him place the plate. He doesn't fumble. The wheel fits. Almost. You help just enough. It spins, not fast, Not perfect, but it lives. By mid-morning, the shop is awake, fully, not just ticking, but alive with motion, with the clink of tools and the light curse of an apprentice, realizing he put the pallet fork in upside down. Again. You don't scold him. Much. Instead, you sit by the front window, where the light is strongest, with a disassembled marine chronometer spread before you like a feast of brass and stubbornness. It came in last week, salt-crusted and sullen, from a captain who swore it kept time perfectly until he crossed the channel. It didn't. You remove the top plate with surgical care. Inside a mess of oxidation, a hairspring that looks like it was stepped on by a seagull, and enough rust to suggest it went swimming. You sigh. But it's the kind of sigh that means challenge accepted. Quirky fact: marine chronometers in the 18th century were considered vital instruments of navigation designed to calculate longitude at sea. But even the best ones lost accuracy due to temperature shifts, humidity, and often rats. This one is French, beautifully made, terribly treated. You polish the balance wheel, scrub the barrel, and use a toothbrush dipped in alcohol to coax the salt out of the pinions. The escapement jewel is chipped, and you don't have a perfect match, but you do have a sliver of garnet that'll do in a pinch. Historians still argue whether the advent of marine chronometers saved more lives through accurate navigation or simply caused more arguments among officers. Probably both. You rebuild the spring tension from memory. File down the cracked pivot. Reshape the balance arm slightly, just enough to rebalance the swing without destabilizing the whole train. It takes an hour. You lose track of time. Irony noted. You test it. Wind once. Tick, 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 tick. Fast. Too fast. You adjust the regulator screw. Tick, tick. Pause. Tick. Perfect. You close the case and glance out the window. Across the street, the widow Martin is hanging laundry. Her line's too low again, and her cat is eyeing it like a ladder. You watch. Say nothing. Let the moment tick forward. The apprentice finishes something. He grins, lifts a half-reassembled desk clock and winds it. It runs. You nod, the most praise you'll give today. You set the marine chronometer aside for testing. It needs a few days to prove itself, just like people. You write in the ledger, Marine number 44, cleaned, balanced, possibly seaworthy, not tested on rats. Then you stretch your arms. Your back pops like a time capsule. And just then, ding, the shop door opens. A boy enters, not more than 12, holding a small clock like it's a wounded animal. It doesn't tick, he says. You crouch to his level. It will, you reply. The boy's clock is a mess. A beautiful, disastrous mess. It's a travel clock, wooden, lacquered with faded flowers, painted along the border of the face. The kind of piece that's seen generations of mantelpieces, and at least 2 weddings, 1 war, and a dozen failed attempts to clean it with vinegar. You gesture for the boy to follow you to the bench. He walks quietly, holding the clock with both hands like it might whisper if he squeezed it too hard. Yours, you ask. He shakes his head. My grandmother's. It stopped on her birthday. She says that's lucky. You raise an eyebrow. Is it? He shrugs. She's still alive. Fair enough. You set it down on the velvet mat and begin. The boy watches your every move like he's afraid you might disappear if he blinks. You remove the backplate gently, like peeling away the skin of a fruit that hasn't seen daylight in decades. Inside gears, dulled with soot. A mainspring that looks like it lost a fight with time, and enough dust to knit a sweater. Quirky fact. In the 18th century, small travel clocks were often stored in leather pouches and placed under pillows at inns, supposedly to keep thieves away, more likely to muffle the ticking while travelers tried to sleep. You ask the boy, was it dropped? Twice, he says without shame. You begin cleaning, a soft brush, a tiny bit of oil. Then you lift the escape wheel and show him how the teeth work. He leans closer, mesmerized. You explain how time isn't kept by hands but by tension. Clocks don't move because they want to, you say. They move because they're always trying to relax. He blinks. I think I'm a clock, he whispers. You smile. You'll tick again. You reassemble slowly, showing him each step. He's got good eyes. Maybe in 5 years, he'll come back as an apprentice or a poet. You wind it. The hands hesitate, then tick. Barely audible, but definite. He beams. You close the case, polish the face, and hand it back to him. Don't drop it again, you say. I won't. You will. He laughs. You watch him walk out the clock, cradled in his arms, like treasure. Outside, the street is alive. Barrels roll, horses clop. Someone plays a fiddle badly from an open window. Inside, you sit again at your bench and begin the next repair. Historians still argue whether clockmakers shaped the world by measuring it, or if the world shaped them by demanding order where there was only drift. You think it's both, because every day you sit here shaping time from brass and silence, and every night it shapes you back. The afternoon creeps in sideways, sneaking through the warped panes of glass with lazy, honey-colored light that pools across your workbench like spilled varnish. You pause your file mid-stroke because it's that light, the kind that comes only once a day for about 10 minutes and turns every scratch and dent on your tools into something holy. The brass gleams like memory. The steel glows like truth. Even the oil-stained cloth looks worthy of a shrine. You don't speak. You just let it happen. Outside, the sounds of the town soften. A lull between errands, between market and supper. Somewhere a dog barks 3 times and then forgets why. You pick up the Vienna regulator you've been restoring. Its case is tall, narrow, carved with modest flourishes, ivy leaves, a single lion's head, no angels. It came from a lawyer's estate, sold hastily after his death by a nephew who thought it was just furniture. You know better. This one ticks like an argument. Quirky fact: Vienna regulators were prized in the late 18th century for their elegant proportions and precise timekeeping. Some were so accurate, they became the reference clocks for entire villages. You open the case. The weights have been restrung, the pulleys cleaned, the beat adjusted. Now comes the delicate part, the fine-tuning of the pendulum. You check the swing. It arcs left, then right, then too far left. You narrow the crutch gap by a hair's width. Try again. Better. You mark the seconds by heart. 30 beats. Spot on. You exhale. Close the case. The glass door clicks shut. You write in the ledger, Vienna regulator Ivy case, restored to civility. Then, from the back shelf, you retrieve something less civil. A French bracket clock, all gilt and gilt, its face cracked, its hands mismatched, its chime module so out of tune it sounds like a drunk harpsichord. Someone once loved this piece enough to over-polish it, erasing half the engravings and all of the charm. You consider not fixing it, but the apprentice catches your glance. That's the one that rang 13 at noon, right? You nod. And you're going to fix it. You smirk. Of course not. I'm going to convince it. He watches as you open the back panel and stare at the strike train like it just insulted your ancestry. Historians still argue whether the French or the Germans made better chiming clocks. The French had style. The Germans had consistency. You personally wish they'd just talk to each other. You realign the snail cam, file the rack teeth, then test the chime. It rings once, twice, then pauses, then 4 more times. You groan. The apprentice stifles a laugh. It's speaking Latin, you mutter. Eventually, it obeys, mostly. 12 strikes at 12, no more, no less. You leave the face cracked, a reminder. You write in the ledger, French gilt beast, tamed but not reformed. Then you lean back and realize the golden light is gone. Your tools are just tools again. The spell is over. The sky outside shifts again, sliding from soft amber to a bruised gray that signals an approaching storm, not loud, not theatrical, just the kind of rain that forgets to leave for hours. You light the second oil lamp. The glow returns to your tools like old promises. The shop smells faintly of brass polish and damp wool, yours mostly from the coat you forgot to hang. You're working now on something special. An orrery. It's not technically a clock, but it moves. And anything that moves with gears belongs on your bench. This one's a mess. A celestial model in miniature. The sun a crank and 6 planets 7, if you count the loose copper ball rolling in the drawer, marked miscellaneous moons. Historians still argue whether orreries were scientific instruments or elaborate toys for the bored rich. The answer, of course, is yes. This one came from a retired professor who swore it used to align with real planetary motion before the cat knocked it off the mantle during a particularly volatile Mercury retrograde. You believe him? Sort of. Quirky fact. The earliest orreries were driven by clockwork, borrowed directly from long case clocks. Some were so accurate they predicted eclipses. Others spun with such optimism that Saturn completed a full orbit in just 30 seconds. You carefully remount the sun. Its brass orb gleams dully. Jupiter is dented. You smooth it with a burnisher. Earth wobbles. You realign the axle. You reattach Mars. Last. Always Mars. Because something about it makes you nervous, like it's always watching. Then you wind the crank. Slowly. The planets spin. Earth completes a lazy circle. Venus pirouettes. Saturn drags behind, as usual. The copper moon joins in pretending it belongs. You watch. You feel something stir in your chest. Maybe it's pride. Maybe it's vertigo. Or maybe it's the realization that this right here is the closest you've ever been to holding the heavens in your hand. You place the orrery gently in the window, where passers-by will see it tomorrow, and believe just briefly that the world still orbits something noble. You return to your bench. The apprentice is asleep again, head on his arms, breathing in time with the regulator on the wall. You toss a cloth over him, not unkindly. Then you look at the last job for the day. A fusee and chain pocket watch from a woman who said it used to belong to a man who always left on time and once came back. You smile at that. It's missing its chain, but the barrel still sings when you turn it. A high, delicate whir like the sound of wings too small to carry regret. You'll repair it tomorrow. Tonight it's enough to let it hum. By now the rain has found its rhythm. Not a storm, no, just a long, sighing drizzle that taps on the window panes like a metronome, too shy to demand your attention. It has a softness to it, the kind that muffles footsteps, encourages tea, and makes clocks seem louder than they really are. You've locked the front door. The sign says, closed. But you're still working, because time doesn't end when the street empties. You're hunched over a lantern clock, tall, squat, and unrepentantly noisy. This one arrived wrapped in 2 scarves and a prayer from a widow who said it belonged to his grandfather, but it hated mine. You didn't ask, just nodded and took it in. Historians still argue whether lantern clocks, those iron-framed bell-on-top monstrosities, belonged in kitchens or parlors. They were loud, temperamental, and looked vaguely like medieval torture devices. But they worked. Oh, they worked. Quirky fact. Some lantern clocks didn't have pendulums, but balance wheels and verge escapements, so touchy they could be thrown off by a passing breeze or a sneeze. This one's verge is intact, surprisingly. The issue lies in the striking mechanism, specifically the count wheel. Its notches are worn smooth. You run a finger across them, barely there, like trying to read a book that's forgotten its own alphabet. You replace it with one from your bin of salvaged regrets. It fits, almost. You file. Gently. Try again. Now it clicks. You reset the hammer spring, adjust the bell post. Then you test it. 1 chime. 2, 3. Perfect. But then it rings again. 4, 5, 7. You frown, then smile. The count wheel isn't misaligned. It's proud, just a little over-eager to perform. You let it finish all 13 chimes, then whisper, "Show off," and tap the bell gently, as if telling it to hush. The apprentice stirs. You think he mutters something about soup. You ignore it. You wind the clock fully. Set the hands to match your regulator. Then carry it to the side shelf where the finished pieces wait like graduates lined up for a ceremony that never starts on time. You stand a moment, listening. There's a symphony now. The big regulator ticking once per second. The bracket clock with its smug, chiming rhythm. The pocket watch still purring softly in its open case. And now the lantern clock muttering in the corner like a grandparent telling a story no one asked for, but everyone secretly enjoys. You sit back down. The apprentice is snoring. The rain continues. You take out the small tin of watch jewels, not because you need one, just to admire them. Tiny sapphires, rubies, garnets, all ground so fine they barely count as matter, just colored light pretending to be solid. You hold one up to the lamp, let it catch the glow, then tuck it away again, because there's nothing else to fix. Not tonight. And that's rare enough to honor. It's well past midnight. You should be asleep, or at least pretending to be asleep. But instead, you're sitting at your workbench with your feet up, a lukewarm cup of something once resembling tea in your hand, and a candle burning low beside a pile of tools that finally, miraculously, have nothing left to fix. The shop is quiet. Not silent clocks never allow for that. They breathe, remember. A soft army of gears and escapements all ticking in overlapping rhythms. Not in sync. Never in sync. Like a room full of stubborn old men, muttering to themselves about different stories, all starting with the same phrase, "In my day." You like it. You wouldn't want it any other way. On the far wall, your father's final clock ticks steadily now. You haven't touched it again since the repair. Not because it's perfect, but because it's enough. It ticks like grief, soft, persistent, never asking for attention, but always there. The apprentice is curled on a folded blanket by the hearth, mouth slightly open, one sock missing, his hair sticking up like he lost a duel with static. You almost feel fond. You look over at the old automaton again, still covered, still quiet, still too beautiful to dismantle. Quirky fact. In the 1700s, there were rumors of clockmakers who built automatons so convincing that people swore they had souls. One Parisian inventor was said to have fled his shop after his mechanical boy started writing poetry he never taught it. You smile. You'd believe that. On some nights, especially like this, you wonder if time is really something you measure or something you chase. Because when you think back, the most powerful moments in this little shop had nothing to do with gears or springs or even ticking. It was in the silence between, in the stillness after a clock finally exhaled. You place your mug down, walk to the front door, open it just a crack. The rain has stopped. The street glistens like wet slate under a moon, too tired to shine properly. You step outside, barefoot, just for a moment. The stone is cold beneath your feet. You listen. No horses, no merchants. Just the sound of the town sleeping around you. A town full of clocks you've fixed, and people who never noticed the hands were off until they weren't. You close the door gently, return to the bench. Wind the regulator. One slow turn. It clicks into place like a secret. You write one final line in the ledger for the night, all in order until morning disagrees. Then you blow out the lamp and let the clocks keep watch. The morning doesn't arrive all at once. It leaks, soft and slow like syrup from a jar someone forgot to close properly. It filters through the dusty upper panes of your shop windows, making halos out of cobwebs and smudges and turning every brass cog into something a little holier than it probably deserves. You're already awake. Did you sleep? You think so. Maybe for an hour, maybe not. But your bones feel rested in that strange way only silence can offer. The apprentice stirs, rubbing one eye with the back of his wrist, then looking around like he doesn't quite recognize the world yet. You say nothing, just pass him a piece of bread. He eats it, wordlessly. The two of you sit in that shared quiet, like co-conspirators in a plot against noise. Eventually, the town will wake. The doors will open. The shoes will scuff. The woman with the hat, 3 sizes too wide, will yell at the fishmonger again. But for now, the world is yours. You move to the window and flip the sign from closed to open. It swings on its little hook, ticking once as it settles. 1 tick, just one. But it's enough. Behind you, clocks begin their daily chorus. A chime here, a faint cuckoo there. The bracket clock clears its throat. Even the automaton, untouched, somehow seems more alert. You look around the shop, and you feel it, not pride, not joy, not even peace, exactly, just rightness. This is what the inside of time feels like. Not a race, not a threat, but a room full of small promises being kept. Historians still argue whether time is linear, cyclical, or just an illusion designed to make lunch feel earned. You don't care. You have gears to oil, hands to align, tiny levers to coax into ticking again. You have the patience of 1,000 hours behind a bench and the knowledge that nothing, absolutely nothing runs forever, which is why you do this. To buy time, one heartbeat at a time. You return to your bench, place your tools just so, and as the first bell in the square rings out, you begin again, wind down. 300 words. The room grows quieter now. The clocks keep ticking, yes, but softer, more slowly, as if even they know it's time to rest. Your hands rest gently on the table, no longer working, just feeling the rhythm echo through the wood grain. Outside the sky brightens, but inside the shop, everything moves like honey. You breathe in through your nose. The scent of old wood, warm brass, and lamp oil still hangs in the air. It's familiar, comforting. Nothing here is in a rush. No one is demanding the minutes back. No deadlines, no bells. Just the heartbeat of tiny machines keeping promises to no one but themselves. You lean back. Your eyelids grow heavy. Even your thoughts begin to drift soft, rounded like worn gears. And in this moment, nothing is broken. Nothing is waiting. It all just is. So let the sound of ticking lull you deeper. Let the rain-soaked cobblestones and oil lamp shadows wrap themselves around you like a blanket. You've traveled far tonight, not in miles but in time, through the gears of memory, the cogs of quiet craftsmanship, the small miracles of fixing something because it was worth the trouble. Now, rest. Let your breathing match the beat of the regulator on the wall. 1 second, 1 breath. You've done enough. Good night, timekeeper. Good night, dreamer. Sleep well.